Since the dawn of the 21st century, scientific discovery has rushed forward at lightning speed. Genetics, physics, computerized technology, robotics, virtual reality. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert as they uncover the truths behind this ultimate scientific deception. Welcome to Sci Friday.
It's Friday, and that means time for... Science! Welcome to Sci Friday. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and I don't know that means that you sigh every time you show up. I hope it does not, but we want to welcome you to another episode of Sci Friday. We're running out of weeks for the year.
We are, and scientifically, I think time actually does move more quickly the older we get, or at least it seems that way.
It seems, it's what Sam used to say, it's because humans are actually counted in dog years. and because we just really can't remember from one day to the next, which the older I get, the more it is true. This will be my 71st Christmas on this earth.
Wow.
I'm 70 years old, therefore my first one occurred when I was just a few months old.
A very biblical and important number, meaning the
70?
year of completion.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I hope it doesn't mean the year of completion.
Oh,
We're
no.
praying that the Lord has many more years for us to do this side by side.
I'm just praying that by the time I get to be 80, he'll say, now we're going to, this is going to be
like Moses.
Like Moses. Now your real ministry begins.
Yeah.
But we got to do something extraordinary, and the time went by far too fast a few years ago when after we went to Israel, we decided to fly to Great Britain, and we spent time in England and Scotland with our great hosts, Juan and John.
Yes.
And Terry.
And Margaret.
Margaret, she didn't travel with us, but we got to spend some time with her. Wonderful, wonderful people. Juan is actually Spanish.
Yeah, and learned to speak English from Scottish friends. So he speaks with a Scottish-Spanish accent, which is really unique.
I'm not really sure what that combo is, but it's very unique.
It's wonderful.
But we got to go over there, so we did that because of my Redwing Saga series is set in England and Scotland, and now it's going over to Germany and some other places. Mm-hmm. But we'll go there one day.
Well, yeah.
But we did this so we could actually make a documentary about it.
We did, and as time goes by so quickly, finding the time to edit the video that we shot into a cohesive narrative has just kind of slipped by these last 3 years. So
we'll try to get it done over Christmas.
We will, and we thought though, as we are featuring Sharon's Redwing Saga collection in our online store during this month,
mm-hmm.
December and January, 22 and 23, that we would show you some of the sites that are featured prominently in the Redwing Saga and explain why this is relevant to a story that is based around teaching spiritual warfare through storytelling.
I love writing these books, and I've learned a lot about the just scripture. I've learned that Psalm 23 is a whole lot more than I thought it was, that the Romans 8:28 promise is something you can really hang your hat on every day, as is Psalm 23. When we go to Israel, in fact, when we are in that whole area,
mm-hmm.
That is actually the Valley of the Shadow of Death. It's a physical place. So we'll go there, and I'm going to read Psalm 23 there.
That is going to be amazing.
But the first place we went, when we went to England, because that was our first stop for this Redwing Saga tour, we went to Kent.
Right,
we actually went to Leeds Castle first.
Right. It was... interesting. I assumed we'd fly into Heathrow, but we flew into Luton, which is interesting that we were able to do that because that was easier to get out of.
And it was closer.
Closer. And from there, we traveled to Leeds Castle. Now, why did you include Leeds Castle? I'm gonna be the interviewer here.
Oh, okay. I like that.
Over that. Why Leeds Castle?
Well, I will tell you the answer to that in just a second. I want to make sure that everybody understands that we had companions, not just one Renau, who was our driver. He was just incredible. But we also took our dachshund substitute, Dizzy, who was given to us by the Dizdars.
Yes.
Which is why he's called Dizzy. And we miss them so very much. And that's another reason I'm glad we took him with us on this tour. So we had I think Juan had a good time joking around with Dizzy.
He did. And of course, Dizzy is still on set. You might be able to see him in the background there.
Yeah, but your question, you asked why Leeds Castle. It's because it has a maze.
Okay. Now, there's a maze that factors into the storytelling very prominently.
It's huge. There are a lot of mazes. And I include that because, well, first of all, as a believer, I feel like sometimes I take what I think is the right path, and then I find myself at a dead end. You do that in a maze. And it's not like I'm saying that the Lord is intentionally leading us through misguided turns. It's just I choose incorrectly, and the Lord has to recalculate and take me back because he is working everything together according to his will. But the maze in the Redwing Saga, there are a lot of pagan installations that have mazes. The most famous one, of course, is the Theseus has to go through the...
Oh, yes, the Minotaur.
Yeah, the Minotaur.
Right.
That's the word I couldn't think of. See, you get to be my age and you can't think of nouns. They're so hard. But the Minotaur, and of course Theseus is in the Redwing Saga later on.
Right.
But Charles and Elizabeth both go through. They have to pass through a number of mazes, physical and spiritual. And so I wanted to see this actual maze. It's one of the most famous mazes in all of Great Britain. But what I found most interesting is not the maze itself. It was the grotto beneath it.
Oh, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, you've got this amazing hedge maze, which is the curators
we needed
very
help
gratefully,
getting around.
Yeah, they gratefully or very graciously provided little clues where you could go and open a little sign.
Little
Okay,
box.
go this way, and that helped us get through it.
It
But
did.
the grotto in the middle of the maze was very.
Well, it was a little disturbing. I'm sure that it was just meant to be playful.
Yeah.
But there was imagery in there that if you take a spiritual warfare view, which you and I do, and most of you do, you would find it, I think, a little disquieting. It was like Halloween plus the Grotto of Pan.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. And I don't recall any good reason for the grotto to be there other than just, hey, this is something that's like what kids will see in their cartoons on Saturday mornings or what. Well, of course, cartoons are 24/7 now. Not just Saturday mornings. But it was really striking and, as you say, kind of disturbing that was at the very center of the maze.
Well, and in the Redwing Saga, there is actually a tunnel system, another maze system beneath the hedge maze. So that's what when I saw that there was a sort of passage that you had to go through to get out of the hedge maze, really surprised me.
You had to go through the grotto to get out. And these horrific representations.
Yeah, it was very strange. But after that, we went to Kent.
And Kent, well, again, interesting that Leeds was on the way to Kent because Kent is the very important location in the Redwing Saga.
Huge location in the Redwing Saga. Branham Hall is there, and I named it Branham Hall because that's one of my family names. But yeah, Branham Hall is there. Kent is in the news all the time right now because they are dealing with a lot of illegal immigration coming into the Dover area, which is in Kent. So while we were there, we got to go to a seaside bed and breakfast, seaside hotel that was glorious. But Branham Hall is very close to the sea. And it's a location that figures into the real biography of Edmund Reed.
Oh, okay. Now, Edmund Reed is one of the... Explain who Edmund Reed is.
He's one of the actual investigators in the Jack the Ripper murders. He was inspector, head of most of the divisions in investigations for the Criminal Investigation Department, which is CID, part of Scotland Yard. And so he was a detective who was in charge of that, along with Fred Aberline, who was sometimes called a chief inspector, but he was actually a first rank inspector. And so it's now called a chief inspector, but they didn't call it that at the time. But Aberline was in charge of H Division when the whole thing started. So when Reed took over, Aberline came in and sort of helped.
Okay.
So they investigated. Well, Edmund Reed retired to Hampton-on-Sea, which in my imagination isn't far from Branham Hall. I just call it Anjou-on-Sea.
Gotcha.
But I'd say that Hampton is nearby.
Okay. Now, Edmund Reed was one of the historic characters, one of a number of historic characters that you bring into the Redwing Saga, along with Frederick Aberline.
I do.
And
by the way, we stayed at Herne Bay. Herne, as in Herne the Hunter.
We can talk about that if you like, or we can get into that as we get a little further
huge.
north.
That would take an entire program.
In fact, we've done a program on Hearn and Hernunos. You can find that in the Sci Friday archives at SciFriday.tv. The location then from Kent and the location of that region. Why did you choose to set Branham Hall in Kent?
Well, I've always found Kent really interesting, and one of the things that I find the most interesting about Kent is that it used to belong to the Vikings. The kingdom of Kent was given to Hengist and Horsa by Ambrosia. Vortigern. Thank you.
Now we're talking my language.
Now
Arthurian,
we're talking.
yeah.
Well, exactly. And of course, Arthurian lore figures heavily into the Redwing Saga.
Okay.
So I wanted to go to a place that was really steeped in that very old, very pagan history.
So Horsa and Hengist were the two Saxon brothers that Vortigern, who was a successor to Arthur in the stories, in the early 5th century, brought them over to fight off the Picts, who were the Celts from the north, from Scotland, who were coming down and raiding. And he thought, okay, we'll give land to the Saxons and we'll let them come in and hire them as mercenaries.
And they'll be nice. They'll stay where we put them.
Knight of the Long Knives.
Yeah, exactly. You want to explain that?
That was essentially a
Hengist
a peace treaty. Yeah. Hengist and Horsa invited the 300 nobles of the leading Britons, and this is why Great Britain is called Great Britain. The Celts, who formerly owned, before the Angles and Saxons came in and turned it into Angle land, dominated the land. They controlled the land. And these British noblemen were at a dinner, and at a certain signal during this dinner, the Saxons pulled out their knives and stabbed and basically wiped out the nobility of Britain all in one fell swoop.
And what surprises me is that nobody saw it coming.
Yes.
Oh, they're so nice.
This kind of thing happens over and over again in history.
It's a political thing that we see today.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But
Kent is a land being contended over for many years and a lot of bloodshed.
Yes, and a lot of paganism in Kent, well, all over England, if you go back, most lands that we live in. But England is just... It's something that I've really studied since I was a kid, partly because of Arthur. So that's why Kent.
Okay.
And from Kent, we went to London, I think.
We went to London. We went through Canterbury on the way. I don't know if you want to talk about
we did.
cathedral.
You know what? Canterbury Cathedral was just incredible. And we got to have a personal tour of the area where the friend of Henry II was killed. He was Archbishop at the time.
Was it Thomas Becket?
Thomas Becket. That's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Again, memory just is really going. Thomas Becket was killed at a specific spot. It was that moment when Henry II,
That's right, yes.
because Thomas would know, it's the other thing. He gave Thomas a job thinking Thomas would play ball and do everything he told him to do. No, Thomas took it seriously and really wanted to act like a head of the church. So Henry, to his barons, to his nobles, said, "Will no one rid me of this troublesome priest?" And then he was surprised when they did.
Yeah. Killed him right there in the
in the cathedral.
So
so we got to see that spot and hear the lore. But then after that, we went to London, and I think we're going to have to take a break before we tell you all about. Well, we went to Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah,
place.
And also the location of the police station that investigated the Ripper murders.
Yes.
That's
on
ahead.
Lehman Street.
Yeah, that's ahead on Sci Friday. You have blessed us with your support during our first year in ministry. You literally make it possible for us to do what we do. And so as we prepare to head into a new year, we want to return the blessing to you. Through January, we've prepared a number of special offers at the Gilbert House store, and we're featuring the Redwing Saga, Sharon's wonderful series of supernatural thrillers that teaches spiritual warfare through masterful storytelling with fascinating historical mysteries as the backdrop. Now, all 8 novels in the Redwing Saga, a $160 value, can be yours for just $110, a savings of $50. You'll also find the Derek Gilbert collection, all 5 of my nonfiction books, a $100 value for just $70. Those are just 2 of the special offers available through January at our online store. You'll find it at gilberthouse.org/store. And as always, we thank you for your prayers and your support. Welcome back to Sci Friday. I'm Derek Gilbert.
Oh, I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we're having the best time reminiscing about our trip through England and Scotland. And I wish I had more coffee. I'd probably be able to remember things better. But London, I wanted to go there because most of the action takes place there. And most of it takes place either in Westminster or in Whitechapel. And Whitechapel, of course, was the location of H Division, which is the police station that investigated the Jack the Ripper murders that took place in Whitechapel and Spitalfields. Spitalfields at the time was a sort of much like in England now. Immigrants were just flooding into the southeast, flooding into Kent, and then making their way to London. Well, back then, the Russians were going in and taking over various territory. They took over Ukraine. Imagine that. They took over Kiev, which they're battling for today. Well, Jews especially were hunted down by the Russians at the time, so they were fleeing. So beginning at about the time of the Crimean War, the Russian pogroms were taking place, and you either had to pay money or you were tortured, or you were captured. So a lot of Jewish immigrants were filling the East End of London, and many of them settled in Spitalfields. So one of the big claims during the Jack the Ripper murders was that it was a Jew who was killing them and taking parts of the bodies and turning them into these mandragora candles or other types of pagan candles. There was a type of candle that had to be made from a murder victim, preferably a woman, preferably the girl
for
parts.
magical purposes.
For magical purposes. The Jews weren't doing this. They were not, but they were convenient dupes, scapegoats. Thank you very much. So that was what was going on in the East End at the time in 1888, which is when the book really takes off.
How
in
do
the
you
first
use
book.
the Ripper murder? You have a different take on this than many other fictional treatments.
I do. A lot of fictional treatments try to actually find a human being. Well, if you look at the interviews with witnesses, you will find a variety, about a dozen different types of descriptions that cannot be the same person. It wasn't just that, I only got a glimpse, or the lighting was really bad. The hats they were wearing were different. The way they walked were different. The way they talked was different. Some of them were like what they called toffs, the West End wealthy individuals. Some others were like sailors. Others were described as just scruffy and, the typical. Some were described as Jews. If you look at that, then either it was a gang that were taking turns doing this. Why they were doing it was probably for some sort of pagan purpose. But I take the position that it was actually a demonic group of individuals, a group of individuals who wanted power from the spirit realm. And by getting that, they had the ability to be totally taken over or imitated. In other words, a demon pretending to be you, but having the ability to suddenly turn into something else, something animalistic. And very quickly, sometimes I think the the spirit realm have the capability of interacting with our material realm in the blink of an eye. What may seem like 5 or 10 minutes to them, or even an hour, might be half a second to us. So that's, I think, may explain why the murders happened so quickly. A policeman would walk by, and 1-2 minutes later, he'd walk by again, and there'd be a victim, and she'd have all of these things done to her in that space of time.
And by that, you mean basically vivisected, basically?
Yes. Throat cut, vivisection. Things taken out.
So a supernatural explanation for Jack the Ripper.
I think that makes the most sense.
The reason he wasn't caught was because he wasn't human.
Exactly.
And to what end were these murders?
Well, in the series, I make the case that it was to gain power within, sort of like gassing up with spirit power, because the Round Table, which was a part of a group called Redwing in the saga, Redwing are the bad guys, and they're called that because their whole purpose is to take out the Holy Spirit in our world.
Based on the depiction of the Spirit descending like a dove. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. They have a wounded dove. That's why the red wing is the logo on the series. Redwing is just one of many, 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 many groups that interact with the fallen realm to get power. So the purpose of the Ripper murders in my saga was to get enough spirit gasoline in the engine so they could release a watcher. And they need to release 13 of them.
Okay. And the end then being to manifest.
To manifest, there is a scripture that says if certain things were to happen, the fallen realm would fill the earth with cities.
Right.
But the word there is not actually translated cities, should not be.
Yeah, that's in Isaiah chapter 14, which is the very famous chapter that begins with, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer,
and the
son of the morning."
Septuagint gets it right.
Yeah. Let's see here. It is, "May the offspring of evildoers nevermore be named. Prepare slaughter for his sons because of the guilt of their fathers, lest they rise and possess the earth and fill the face of the world with cities." But the Hebrew word translated cities is identical to the Aramaic word for watchers.
Yes.
And in fact, that is the word that is translated watchers in Daniel chapter 4. So
fill the earth with watchers. Now think about that. Go back. Let them not be named.
may the offspring of evildoers nevermore be named.
Those are the Nephilim, the ancestors.
And the reason for not naming them
Exactly.
is because if their names are forgotten, at least this was the belief of humans in the ancient world, pagans around ancient Israel, if your name was forgotten, then you ceased to exist. So that's what they're saying.
I know. So in these rituals, the names would be called again and again and again, and offerings would be made, and those offerings in the Redwing Saga are blood-drenched offerings. And I think in the pagan realm, in antiquity, that also went on, and I fear that it goes on even today.
Well, yeah. So
So we went to Lehman Street.
Lehman Street, but we also went to another street. I want to show this picture on the screen here because one of the locations used as a headquarters by the evil realm was actually, I was surprised this actually existed.
It's a real street.
Wormwood Street.
I know. It's Wormwood Street. Now, if you have read Bible prophecy, and even in the Old Testament sometimes, the word wormwood comes up. It's artemisia. It's a plant that, frankly, is used in making... yes.
Absinthe.
Absinthe. I'm absinthe-minded. But it's used in making that, and it was crawling all over the remains of the original Roman wall when the Romans had Londinium.
Okay.
So this was part of the original wall that went around the actual original tower. The old tower.
Wow.
That was later, I think the Romans built the first bit that became the Tower of London. But then, of course, William the Conqueror came in and he zhuzhed it up. He built something spectacular. But yeah, there's a bit of that wall that's left. And wormwood still crawls up it. So even back then and still today, we were on a street named Wormwood right there in the city of London.
From there, we went to Baker Street, saw the Sherlock Holmes Museum, 221B Baker Street.
We did, but before that, we went to the pub.
Oh, yes.
That features heavily in a TV show called Ripper Street. And it was the place where the H Division actually did go and have their lunch all the time. Yeah.
That was fun to go there and have a sandwich.
We were the only ones in there.
I would have thought that would have been a tourist destination.
I thought it was too. So anyway, we went in there, and then of course we went. Our guide, Juan asks, "Is it okay if we go to the Sherlock Holmes Museum? I know it's not part of Redwing." And I said, "Oh, it will be," which of course it is now because I love Sherlock Holmes. My dad called me Sherlock when I was growing up. So yes, we went to the Sherlock Holmes Museum on 221B Baker Street.
That was an amazing thing.
It was so cool. So yes, we were in London for a little while, and then we had to leave, and we went a little west of there. Actually, first we went to Blenheim.
Went to Blenheim.
Which is in Oxfordshire, I think.
Yes. Of course, this was after we stopped at the very famous pub, the Eagle and Child, which is where the Inklings met, which was J.R.R. Tolkien.
Everything is up there.
C.S. Lewis.
Yes, C.S. Lewis. The Inklings were this group of writers that tried to encourage one another when they were all going to school at Oxford. So, yes, we went to that pub, and it did have a lot of people in it.
It did, yeah. That was very crowded.
It was a whole lot of fun. Had a great sandwich there. So, yes, we went there, and then we went to Oxfordshire to Blenheim Castle. And the reason I wanted to go there is because that is a typical palace. Blenheim is actually had permission to call itself a palace, and the Crown paid for most of the construction because the Queen wanted the Duke of Marlborough to have a symbol that represented his big victory at Blenheim during the Napoleonic Wars.
Okay, and this is significant because this was the childhood home of Winston Churchill.
It was indeed.
Called Winnie. The Redwing Saga.
He's in the Redwing Saga. He was about
child.
12, 13 years old when we first meet him, and of course he's going to be in there off and on. But yeah, Blenheim Palace, incredible place. I don't think we're going to have all the time to talk about where we went after that, but we went to some incredible places that we will tell you about next week.
Oh, yeah. Glastonbury, Pendragon Castle, and the North.
The North.
We find that amusing as you're driving north in England, that you get this sign that just says, the North, as
like
if there's something ominous about the North. So we'll talk about that.
The North.
Oh, Scotland
I would live in Scotland.
Incredible. We also visited the British Museum, and it's certainly not enough time to discuss what we saw there.
Enough. We may have to do an extra program.
Saw the representations of the Apkallu and the Lamassu there. The Sutton Hoo, the very famous Sutton Hoo helmet.
Yes, we had
so many things that we've only seen in pictures.
Our original plan was to do two programs about our tour of Great Britain. We may have to have a third, which will actually air after the holidays, because we plan to take off 3 weeks so that we can write.
But we'll see how it all goes. But again, a next program definitely will deal with what we saw at Glastonbury, Pendragon Castle.
Oh, yeah. So don't miss next week.
Oh, yeah. Some amazing things. And again, the bottom line of the Redwing Saga, what do you hope readers take away from it?
I hope they take away that, first of all, get excited about the Bible. Second of all, understand the two big takeaways are, A, He does indeed work everything together for good according to his purposes. That's the thing, according to his purposes. He's got a master plan, and it has to do with the fallen realm. And two, he really is our shepherd, which means he is with us all the time. You are never alone.
Amen to that. Thank you for watching. This is Sci Friday.
Sci Friday is a viewer-supported outreach of Gilbert House Ministries. We'd love to hear from you. Contact us through our websites or drop us a line at P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri 65633.